My name is Jolene Rusk. I am 29 years old. On the night of my engagement party, my fiancé died in a car crash on the way home, and I was left with broken ribs and a ring that suddenly felt like a wound. 3 weeks later, the driver was found. And when the detective called me to say what he'd uncovered, I had to sit down on my kitchen floor and hold the phone with both hands. Because the name they gave me, the name attached to the money, the plan, the whole calculated thing, did not belong to a stranger. But before I get there, I need to take you back to that night. Because I want you to understand what it felt like to be happy. Real, full, almost embarrassing happiness, the kind you only get a few times, if you're lucky enough to get it at all. The party was held at a small Italian restaurant my mother had loved for 20 years. The kind of place with low ceilings and candles, stuck in old wine bottles, and a hostess who remembered your name from the last time you came. Both families were there, my parents, my older brother, Griffin's parents, a handful of close friends, his aunt and cousin who'd driven 4 hours from upstate. We'd only been engaged for 6 weeks. I kept forgetting the ring was on my hand, and then remembering it and feeling my breath catch all over again. Griffin stayed close to me the whole night. He had this thing he did at parties, at any gathering where I might feel overwhelmed. He'd keep one hand at the small of my back, just resting there. Nothing dramatic, just so I always knew where he was. 31 years old, and he still made me feel like the most considered person in the room. Near the end of the evening, my brother stood up to give a toast. He was 4 years older than me, and he had always been the comfortable one in a crowd, the one who could work a room without trying. He raised his glass and looked at me with something I thought was genuine affection, and he said, "Nobody deserves this more than you, Joe." His voice caught on the last word in a way that made a few people laugh softly and then go quiet. I felt my eyes sting. When he sat back down, I leaned over and squeezed his arm, and he squeezed my hand back and smiled. I keep coming back to that squeeze, the warmth of it. We said our goodbyes a little past 10. Griffin's mother held me for a long time, long enough that I could feel her earrings pressing into my cheek. My own mother held my face in both hands and looked at me the way she only did on the most important days. "You found a good one," she said. I know I did. The drive home was 22 minutes. I had timed it once as a nervous habit. Something to occupy my hands when I'd first started meeting Griffin's family, and the number stuck. 22 minutes. We talked about the centerpieces his mother had suggested, which Griffin said were objectively hideous, and I was still laughing when we turned onto Hargrove Street. I don't remember the impact. What I remember is sound, a compression, something like the world folding in on itself, and then glass, and a smell I couldn't name, and then nothing at all. I woke up 31 hours later with 3 broken ribs, a fractured left wrist, and a gash along my cheekbone that had required 14 stitches. My mother was in the chair beside my bed. She was holding my hand with both of hers, and her eyes were red, and she didn't look like she had slept. I said his name. She didn't answer. She just held on tighter. I have tried many times since then to explain what that moment felt like, and I keep failing. It wasn't pain, not exactly. Pain has a location and a shape and a direction. This was more like something being removed from inside me that I hadn't known was holding everything together. I think I screamed. I don't fully remember. What I remember is the ceiling, and my mother saying my name over and over, and the knowledge, not the feeling, the actual knowledge, clean and cold, that there was no version of the next hour I was going to survive, and yet I did. That's the cruelest part of grief. You just keep existing. Your body doesn't ask you whether you're ready. The days that followed had a quality I can only describe as waterlogged. Everything moved slowly and weighed too much. Flowers arrived. People sat in my parents' living room and said kind things I mostly couldn't hear. Griffin's mother came every day without calling first. She never stayed long, and she rarely said much. She would sit beside me, and sometimes she'd take my hand, and sometimes she wouldn't, and I found her presence more comforting than anything else anyone offered, because she wasn't trying to fix it or explain it or carry me through it. She was just there, in the same wreckage, surviving the same way I was. The police were in contact throughout those first 2 weeks. They'd caught the driver on a traffic camera 6 blocks from the scene. He'd fled, but not fast enough. They said he had priors. They said it appeared to be a DUI. They were thorough and professional and genuinely sorry, and I believed everything they told me. Then Detective Egan called. He asked me to come in. He said it in that careful way people use when they're not sure how much to say over the phone. Direct but cushioned, like a hand guiding you toward something you'd rather not see. I asked him what kind of developments. He said, the kind that changed the nature of the investigation. I didn't sleep that night. My father drove me to the precinct the next morning. I sat across from Detective Egan in a small office with a parking lot view, and he told me the truth the way I imagine they are trained to do, clearly, methodically, watching my face. The driver's blood alcohol at the time of arrest was 0.04, legally sober. The DUI assumption had been convenient but not accurate. His phone had been wiped before the crash. More significant, a forensic accountant reviewing the driver's financials had flagged an unusual series of transactions. $8,000 moved into a prepaid account approximately 2 weeks before the accident, withdrawn in 4 separate pulls from different ATMs across the city. We believe, Detective Egan said, that the collision was not accidental. I heard each word. I understood them individually. They took a long time to connect. Someone paid him, I said. That's what the evidence indicates. To kill us. He held my gaze. We're still establishing the full scope of intent. But yes, that's the working theory. I sat in that office for another 40 minutes answering questions. Who knew the route we'd take home? Who knew what time we were leaving? Who might have had reason to want either of us harmed? I answered everything I could. Walking back to my father's car, I told him. He stood by the passenger door and stared at the ground for a long moment, and when he looked up, his face had something in it I had never seen before. Not anger. Something older and quieter than anger. Who would do this? He said. I didn't have an answer. Over the next 2 weeks, my mind landed on a woman I'd only encountered twice. An ex-girlfriend of Griffin's. Someone he dated briefly 2 years before we met. She had shown up at the engagement party without an invitation, asked the hostess to pass along her congratulations, and left before we even knew she'd been there. Someone mentioned it to me the next day, almost as an afterthought. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now I thought about it constantly. The timing. The fact that she'd been there. The fact that she'd known about the party at all. I told Detective Egan. He followed up. She had a solid alibi and no traceable connection to the driver. He told me gently that he understood why my mind had gone there, but that I should try not to let it run too far ahead of the evidence. I tried. I was not especially successful. In the meantime, Griffin's father was not sitting still. He was a methodical man. The kind who kept paper files of everything, who approached every problem the way an engineer approaches a failing structure. He hired a private investigator and didn't tell me right away. But my mother did, because she could see the not knowing hollowing me out from the inside. Weeks passed. 7 of them, then 8. The police investigation moved forward, but slowly. The driver had retained an attorney and gone completely quiet. The prepaid account had been opened under a false identity. The phone used to wipe the driver's records had been destroyed. The trail kept narrowing into dead ends, and I started to feel the particular terror of a truth that might stay buried. Not from lack of evidence, but from sheer, patient concealment. Then Griffin's father called everyone together. He asked us all to come to his house. My parents, my brother, a few of Griffin's close family friends. He didn't explain why, only that he had something to share and preferred to do it in person, all at once. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through the door. Not wrong like more bad news. Wrong like the composition of the room had shifted without anyone moving. Griffin's father stood at the far end of the living room with a manila folder on the table beside him. His wife sat in a chair near the window. Everyone else arranged themselves without thinking, the way people do when they sense they need a wall nearby. I'll be direct, he said. He didn't sit down. He hadn't sat down since we arrived, I realized. The investigator I hired traced the payment. The money that went to the driver originated from a shell account opened 9 months ago. That account was connected to a broader financial pattern. A series of transfers and withdrawals the investigator was able to map over the last several weeks. He paused and looked around the room, at each face, one at a time. The trail leads back to someone in this room. My mother made a small sound. My father said, "That's not possible." Griffin's aunt looked at Griffin's mother, who was staring at the folder. I looked at my brother. He was standing near the window, slightly apart from everyone else, and he was very still. Too still. The kind of stillness that isn't calm, it's control. The kind you can only maintain when you're working very hard at it. I kept looking at him. Griffin's father opened the folder. He said, with a steadiness that I think cost him more than I'll ever know, that the investigators' findings had already been shared with Detective Egan, and that law enforcement was in the process of reviewing them. He said the financial documentation was not ambiguous. He said the phone records connecting the Shell account to the driver were clear. And then he said my brother's name. My brother closed his eyes. "No," I said. The word came out before I had decided to say it. "No, there has to be a mistake. You're wrong." My father moved forward. "Explain what you're saying, right now." Griffin's father held his ground. "I'm saying that the account was funded through transactions traceable to your son. I'm saying there were 3 phone contacts between your son and the driver in the 3 weeks before the accident. I'm saying that everything I've just described is now in the hands of the police, and that I expect them to move on it." My brother opened his eyes. He looked at me, and what I saw in his face stopped every word I had. It wasn't rage. It wasn't the face of someone about to fight their way out of a room. It was the face of someone who had been holding something enormous for a very long time, and had finally quietly let it go. "Colt," I said. His name came out like I was trying to keep it from breaking. My mother went to him. She grabbed his arm, his face. She was crying and asking how and why, and telling him it wasn't true. It couldn't be true, and he didn't move. He didn't pull away. He just let her, with his hands at his sides and his eyes somewhere past all of us. My father said, "Tell me this isn't real. Tell me right now." My brother said, "I'm sorry." 2 words, just 2, they rearranged everything. I crossed the room. I needed to hear it from him, not from a folder, not from a detective. I stood in front of him and waited until he looked at me. "Tell me why," I said. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought he might not answer at all. "You won't want to know," he said. "Tell me anyway." He exhaled. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and even and absolutely exhausted. The voice of someone who has been performing for a very long time. "The gambling started years ago," he said, slowly, and then it wasn't slow. I owed people, real people, not just credit cards, not just banks, the kind of people who show up, and when I ran out of places to turn, I borrowed from Griffin. $15,000. He never pressed me. He never mentioned it again, and I almost convinced myself he'd let it go. He stopped. Swallowed. "When you got engaged, he sat me down privately and told me he was planning to document it in the prenuptial paperwork. He said it wasn't about trust. He said he just wanted everything clean going into the marriage. No informal debts. He was kind about it. He was always kind about everything." I couldn't speak. "I didn't have $15,000, my brother said. "I didn't have 1,500. And standing there listening to him be kind about it, I felt something I didn't know what to do with. He looked at his hands. "I'd watched you your whole life, Joe. Good grades, good friends, the right path, always the right path. Mom and Dad were proud in a way that had a different quality when it came to you, and I told myself for years that it didn't matter, that I was fine, that I'd made my own choices. But then you had all of this, the ring, the future, the man who loved you correctly, and I was drowning." His jaw tightened, and he was going to put my failure into a legal document. I could hear my own breathing. "I told myself it was about the money," he said quietly. "I told myself that was the whole reason, that if I could just make the debt disappear, everything would even out somehow." He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. "But I don't think it was really about the money." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The police arrived 35 minutes later. My brother stood when the officers asked him to stand. He put his hands behind his back without being told. He walked toward the door between the 2 officers, and at the threshold he turned and looked at me one more time. Just looked. For a few seconds, like he was trying to memorize something, or like he was searching for something and didn't quite find it. Then he was gone. The trial lasted 3 weeks and took 8 months to begin. I testified. I sat in a witness box and answered questions about my brother, about Griffin, about the night of the party, about a toast, and a squeeze and 22 minutes that I have counted 10,000 times since then. His attorney argued financial desperation, psychological collapse, a mind that had been ground down by debt and shame until judgment simply failed. The prosecution walked the jury through every transfer, every phone contact, every thread of the investigator's findings, carefully and completely. The jury deliberated for 2 days. My brother received a life sentence. I sat in the courtroom when the verdict was read and felt nothing, and then felt everything, and then drove home alone and sat in my kitchen with the lights off for 3 hours and didn't move. People tell me I should feel relief. And there is something that might be relief, somewhere underneath everything else. Griffin deserved justice. He deserved so many things he didn't get: a wedding, a house, ordinary Tuesday mornings, decades of ordinary Tuesday mornings. But here is what no one warns you about. A verdict doesn't give back what was taken. It doesn't unsay your mother's silence. It doesn't undo a hand at the small of your back, or a toast, or the number 22, which I cannot hear or see or count without my chest going tight. Justice is real, and justice matters. And justice is also just a word for what happens after something irreversible, and it doesn't touch the irreversible part at all. I lost Griffin on a Tuesday night in October, on a road I had driven 100 times. And I lost my brother the same night, even though I didn't know it yet. The brother I thought I knew. The one who fixed my car in the cold and showed up when I needed him and said, "Nobody deserves this more than you, Joe." I'm still here. I go to work. I sit with patients who are relearning how to do ordinary things. Button a shirt, hold a pen, carry a glass of water. And some days I am good at helping them. And some days I am just a person sitting in a chair next to another person. Both of us figuring out how to be in a body that has been through something it wasn't supposed to survive. Griffin's ring is in a small wooden box on my dresser. I haven't decided what to do with it. Some days I think I'll know eventually. Other days I think maybe not deciding is its own kind of answer. What I know now, that I didn't know the night I stood in a lit restaurant with a new ring and a family around me and believed, genuinely, fully believed, that I was safe. The people who are supposed to protect you are not always able to. And sometimes, without any warning you could have acted on, they are the ones you need protecting from. There is no version of being careful enough. There is no way to see it coming. I know that now. I carry it everywhere. Some days it's manageable. Some days it's the heaviest thing I own. But I'm still carrying it, and I'm still here,